again, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Semi-Pro. I'm your host, Dalton Barrett, but you may know me better as Barrett Digital. And in the studio with me, I've got my good friend...
Real World of Flash, aka Eunice. What's up, guys?
That's not right. What's going on here?
And he's gone. Hi, I'm Josh Clements, or Brit Edit. I'm not Eunice, aka Real World of Flash. We had someone crash our podcast.
That was so stupid. Why did we do that? Oh, man. What are we talking about, Josh? What's going on here?
Well, we're talking about Twin Peaks, as we have been for the last 3 weeks.
And it's sort of bittersweet, because this is probably the last Twin Peaks discussion that we will ever have in our lives, because Twin Peaks is over. Probably. Maybe not, but probably.
Who knows? To be fair, though, we also say that every week is going to be the last time we mention The Last Jedi, and we still manage to get it in there every single week of our lives.
Okay, see, I've never said that. That's been you. And we still haven't done a dedicated Last Jedi discussion on the podcast, which is mildly upsetting. We just mention it so frequently. But yes, this is Twin Peaks The Return, or Twin Peaks Season 3, which is...
the third season of the show, released 25 years after the first two.
Right. There was a movie in between that we caught last week. If you want to check out the film show on that. If you want to check out the first 2 episodes of the podcast, we talk about Season 1, and then we talk about Season 2. And then, like I said, we have a commentary track of Fire Walk With Me, which is the most awkward, horrifying, disgusting thing we've ever done.
If you want to feel horribly depressed for 2 hours and watch 3 grown men have to watch and talk about multiple sex scenes within a movie, check it out.
I would go worse than sex scenes, but we'll leave it at that.
I was trying to keep it light.
Yeah. If you hate yourself, go and watch that film show. But I do want to talk about The Return, and this is the one I was the most excited to talk about, because while I love the first 2 seasons of the show, let me rephrase, I love the first season of the show and half of the second season of the show, and I really like Fire Walk With Me, the movie. This is probably my favorite Twin Peaks, and it came out about 3 years ago or so, 2017. I guess it's been almost 4 now, but it's different and weird, and we're gonna get into it. We are gonna talk spoilers, but if you don't care about that or you've seen it, stick along for the ride.
Yeah, it's I mean, as we said, I think on the other ones, it doesn't really matter if you know the spoilers because it's Twin Peaks, and even you can know everything about the series and still watch it and still have a great time.
Let me rephrase. You won't know anything about the series even after you've watched it. And
Exactly.
The Return makes that even more evident.
Right. The Return is probably the most abstract that it's ever gotten. Like Season 1 is pretty abstract, but it kind of rides the line. And then Season 2 dips its toes into it, but this is just a full-on... This is like you're drowning in the deep end, and you're trying to get to the shallow end to save yourself. And then you go back into the deep end again.
Fire Walk With Me is really dark.
Really dark, but it's mostly like... 99% of Fire Walk With Me it's fine. It works in the world of realism of just it's more character based than anything else.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what I would argue.
But Twin Peaks in general is more sort of, it's got characters, and its characters have arcs, and they're very they're something. They are characters that exist in a fictional movie and TV show. They
are something else. Arguably not a fictional movie. But we'll get into that later. So let's. I want to break this down. If you want to get into The Return, because it is more recent, it's newer. Let's say you're not into the older stuff. You don't want to watch 2 seasons of a TV show just to watch this 3rd season of the new show, which I would recommend watching a full sweep of Twin Peaks, like we did for the podcast here. Necessary watching. I would argue, and I mentioned this last week on the commentary track, I would argue that Fire Walk With Me is much more necessary to understand this, The Return, than the original series is. Both are somewhat necessary watching, but I would argue that Fire Walk With Me is more necessary to understand this.
Yeah, well, so I've watched The Return sort of 1.5 times. I watched half of it the first time I ever watched Twin Peaks. And during that first watch, I didn't watch Fire Walk with Me because it wasn't available in the UK at the time. So I went into the return just kind of knowing Twin Peaks 1 and 2. As a result, I missed out on so much to do with Fire Walk with Me, particularly the character of Philip Jeffries, and sort of the struggles of, not the struggles, but like the internal conflicts of the Black Lodge and Bob and the Aram.
Right.
But yeah, like you watch Fire Walk with Me, and then I watched The Return, and it just kind of all clicked a bit more.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. There's a lot of really interesting stuff to be said about The Return. There is stuff in there for those classic Twin Peaks fans, but this was made for people who are like David Lynch fans and fans specifically of the Fire Walk with Me. Because
yeah, definitely.
They take the and we'll talk about this a little later too. They take the parody element of the original show basically out of it. Because Twin Peaks, if you're not familiar or didn't watch our other podcast about it, it's sort of this parody of the soap operas that were on at the time. And it does a really good job of that. This sort of completely drops that soap opera aspect of it and almost replaces it. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this with like a
True Detective vibe.
Right, that's exactly what I was going to say. It almost feels like
definitely
a cop show, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It barely feels like a Twin Peaks show. And when I say that, I don't mean it doesn't have the same atmosphere and vibe as Twin Peaks, because it absolutely does. But more just sort of like Twin Peaks season 1 and 2 take place, I think, entirely within Twin Peaks. It's very rare they go outside of it.
Other than James.
Other than, well, not too bad. But, other than that, like, it's all very based in the town of Twin Peaks. Everything's sort of the characters who live in Twin Peaks. And this is more just sort of Gordon Cole and Cooper, and then occasionally something cuts back to Twin Peaks, which you kind of get why towards the end, but like it's very detached from it. Every now and again it cuts back to a character or the town or whatever, and you see like, Bobby's become a police officer, or Big Ed's still with Nadine. Like it goes.
Dr. Jacoby has frickin' lost his mind.
Dr. Jacoby is setting golden shovels in the woods.
And he's got his own conservative-based podcast.
I mean, Dr. Jacoby was never really there in the first place, but he's somehow even further gone.
And that's kind of the really interesting thing about this is it takes the things that you would expect from a revival series like this and just sort of completely gets rid of them.
It does do the same thing that Twin Peaks originally set out to do, and being both a parody and part of like a genre, I suppose, or a subgenre. Like it still sets out to be a parody of True Detective while also giving into that kind of True Detective feel.
Right. I more mean like when you think of a revival series, any of the popular ones, you got like your Star Wars comes back and all these different series as they come back. There's always the big fan service moments, like Han Solo steps into the Millennium Falcon for the first time. And nobody in this series really gets that outside of maybe Bobby kind of gets it.
Yeah, a little bit.
You cut to
like when he sees Laura Palmer's photo on the desk again, he has PTSD.
Well, there's the scene where they're walking down the hallway, and Hawk, says something to him, and he says, "Hey, we need you to come here for a second." And then it's like the slow turnaround, the big reveal of who this cop walking down the hallway is, and turns out it's Bobby. But then you go to like Dr. Jacoby, and it's just like a wide shot of him standing in a trailer. And all of the characters are done that way. Even Cooper, for the most part. There's another shot later on in the series that feels kind of fan servicey for him. But for the most part, it's just everybody is just like It's just standard. It's none of the fan service and none of the big reveals of who's in it, and you don't get any of those moments. You do get the Laura Palmer thing, like you were saying with Bobby, but outside of that and Cooper at the end of the series, you don't really get any of those.
Yeah, you just kind of it just people just exist, which is something that's kind of great about Twin Peaks. Is it does deal nothing it ever deals with is like world ending. It's just kind of chaotic, and yet it frames everything in this kind of idea of just stuff is happening and stuff is going to keep happening, and it's just no one is special,
Right.
and it
Except
like everyone except one person.
right, James. Because James is
Man in the world.
James is so cool.
James has always been cool.
Incredible. So let's kind of break this up this way. We're going to talk the first half of season 1, and then we will talk episode 8, and then we'll talk the second half. Not season 1. The first half of the season, episode 8, second half of the season. So let's kind of break it up that way, and let's kind of break down that first episode. The thing I kind of want to talk about is when we go to the Roadhouse for the first time in that episode, and Shelley looks at James and says, James is so cool. James has always been cool. But you sort of see that this isn't the Twin Peaks that we left.
Yeah, like James looks well. James always looks sad.
I'm not necessarily talking about James. I mean the Roadhouse in general. This doesn't feel like the same town.
Things feel more. So things feel darker. They feel more depressing. Like even in the original series where Shelley's with a man who beats her, like she's at work or she's out and she's still very upbeat and like happy.
Right.
Whether or not she's faking it, that's up in the air, I suppose. But like, then you see Shelley in this, and she's just kind of tired.
Yeah. Well, and everybody does. There's another scene that's a little later because the series kind of builds on this as it goes. A little later in the season, there's a clip from the Roadhouse, which almost every episode ends in the Roadhouse with a musical number, and that's kind of how they show the atmosphere of what's going on in Twin Peaks. And there's this lady, this young woman who's sitting at a table, and these jocks just come up to her and they ask her to leave very rudely, and she says, "No, I want to sit here." And so they physically pick her up out of the booth and sit her on the ground, and she just breaks down into tears and starts crawling away into the crowd of people where the music is blaring so loud you can't hear her, so she just lets out a scream. And it's like little things like that just show us that Twin Peaks, the positive influences in Twin Peaks, like your Dale Coopers or your Laura Palmers or whoever, those positive influences in this town are gone. So what happens to this town without a Dale Cooper there to protect it?
Well, I mean, last week we saw Laura Palmer kind of pimping a friend out.
Well, yes.
So, but no, I get you're right in what you mean. It's like the goodness is gone from the town.
Let's say it like this. What happens when the Bookhouse boys leave Twin Peaks?
What happens when my man Harry leaves Twin Peaks? Because that's the real.
Yeah,
that's
we
why
gotta
it's gone downhill.
We gotta talk about this. So Harry, for whatever reason, the actor didn't want to come back. So they.
That's another thing that's kind of worth mentioning is that over half the actors in this had retired by this point because they're all 90,000 years old.
They're so old, man.
I think it kind of speaks to the kind of person that David Lynch is that he'd ring them up and be like, "Hey, I'm recording a new episode. Can you come back?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come back for like a few episodes or whatever." And so a lot of people return, like Big Ed, Nadine, Dr. Jacoby, Donna's father. He returns, even though he's literally 90,000 years old.
Yeah, no, I mean, and once again,
the mob lady who passed away 2 years prior to cancer, unfortunately, she has a cameo in this, I guess you'd call it.
I mean, she kind of plays into the plot, honestly, which is awesome. Back to Donna's father, Dr. whatever his name is, that scene with him was super heartfelt because they're really just talking, and I'm pretty sure David Lynch just got on a Skype call with this guy, read the lines, and recorded the screen of his computer. Because that's what it is in the actual series. He's just on a Skype call with this guy, and it's great to see little stuff like that. And all of the Log Lady scenes are filmed with her talking on the telephone with Detective Hawk, which is super cool that David Lynch was able to have the foresight to record this just in case he ever makes this series.
Right. Yeah. I don't know when production began on it, which is a good question that we should have probably looked up before. But
yeah, but who cares?
yeah,
Semi-Pro is not exactly known for its intense research. But Harry S. Truman, the absolute Chad detective that he is, does not return for this, but instead his brother, we'll just call him Sheriff Truman because I don't remember his first name because it's not as cool as Harry. His brother has taken
played
over
by Robert Forster, who again also unfortunately passed away, but he does a phenomenal job. He's great.
When I picture the stuff that he has to deliver, the lines that he delivers in this, I can't picture Harry doing it. Honestly, I would argue, as much as I love Harry, I would argue that not recast, but the replacement was done for the better. As sad as that is.
It's Frank, by the way, his name.
Frank, yes, Frank.
Yeah,
Frank Truman.
But yeah, like he's wonderful too. Yeah, like you said, Harry. They don't kill Harry off, which is nice. Like Harry doesn't die. He's just kind of sick. He's out of town sick, so his brother's looking after everything, which is just great. Because you think it'd be Hawk, the deputy who he'd been with him, one of the Bookhouse boys,
right?
But no, he gives it to his brother
or Big Ed, deputized Big Ed.
Give my boy Big Ed something to do. But yeah, it's like mostly everyone returns. Do you want to explain what the series is about?
Well, no, but I do want to talk about because I don't know. I do want to talk for just a second about you brought up Harry being sick, and that sort of goes with this underlying theme throughout the series, specifically when we're in Twin Peaks. Kind of like along with what I was saying earlier about how it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like the same place. And there's this underlying theme of sickness and disease, and there's a lot of other things throughout the series that sort of allude to sickness in Twin Peaks. And one of those being Harry. They make a point to say he's sick. They could have said he's on vacation. They could have said he died. They could have said he retired. Like any of those things would have worked, but instead they went with he's sick. And there's that one scene, if you remember, when the kid shoots through the window of the Double R Diner, and Bobby goes out to the car that is honking in traffic, and there's this woman, and she's just sitting there screaming in the car, this old fat woman, and she's just screaming and screaming, and she goes, "I gotta get her home, she's sick, and then this kid, just like a zombie, raises up her arms, leans forward, and just vomits all over this woman. And it's just horribly disgusting, but it plays into this theme throughout the series of sickness. Make with that what you will. I don't know what to make of it. I just picked up on it. So as we kind of keep going through this, we're introduced back to Special Agent Dale Cooper, but he never opens his mouth, and he's stuck inside the Black Lodge, and he's been there for 25 years.
5 years.
We're also, over the course of this time, reintroduced to the one-armed man known as Mike, and he talks a little exposition. Lurch comes back for this, and we get to see the evolution of the arm. For whatever reason, that actor didn't want to come back, so they replaced him with a tree with a brain on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Right, that's David Lynch for you. But yeah, it was really neat to see the Black Lodge and get to revisit that and whatever. And then that's pretty much episode 1, right? We're reintroduced to Twin Peaks. We get to see Cooper in the lodge, and then that's basically it, right? I can't think of much else. We get to meet back up with our good friend Gordon Cole, who
he's the main character, isn't it? He's the closest thing you have to a main character in this series.
I would argue that. Yeah, I would say he is the main character of this series. My favorite little tidbit about Gordon Cole in The Return is he's still wearing the old-fashioned hearing aids that he wore in the original, but now they're wireless, and he still clips the receiver to the suit coat pocket on the outside. And it's incredible. I love it so much. Also, I take it back. I would say Dougie Jones is the main character, but we'll get there when we get there. So that's basically how the first episode goes. It reintroduces us to Twin Peaks. We get a look into the FBI. We get to explore that a little more than we have in the past. We learn that things aren't quite right with Twin Peaks. Things are a bit off. Not the show, the town. And then we see Cooper in the Black Lodge. Oh, we're introduced to that one guy whose girlfriend keeps hitting on him in the in front of the big black box.
Oh yes, we are. I forgot.
I don't remember his name.
I don't know if he's given a name. I want to say Sam.
Sam Raimi is watching,
and it really doesn't matter because he's dead by the time episode 2 starts.
Right? Yeah. Well, and that's sort of the framework of episode 1 because it kind of opens on that, which once again, a lot like Fire Walk with Me, seems to be very direct TV symbolism about how much David Lynch hates working on TV, even though this is a show.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, truth be told, like there's a lot of stuff in Twin Peaks that you can sort of read into as a metaphor, or you can take as part of the show, and there's a good amount that you just don't know what is going on at all. And this is one of those situations where even on my second viewing, I was like, yeah, I don't know. Because this is what happens, right? This dude sits and stares at a box for 24 hours a day, doing nothing else. And the box has nothing going on with it. And then one time, he invites his girlfriend up there. They start having sex. Cooper appears in the box breaks, and then the spirit of Cooper kills them in a very bloody fashion.
Okay.
And they never talk about it again.
That's not how I read it. And the finale reframed the whole thing. So
that's a literal translation.
Well, because we don't see Cooper in the box, we just see a formless being. My assumption was that was Judy, because when they summon Judy at the end, when Diane and Cooper summon Judy in the finale of the show, they have sex, and that summons Judy. So that was my assumption. And we know Mr. C is the one, we find out later in the series, Mr. C is the one who built that box to trap Cooper when he comes back, but it wound up not working, or trap Judy because he was also hunting Judy throughout the season. So I assumed that was Judy who killed the two of them, not Cooper.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So there we go. But it's that big black box sitting there. They're sitting on a living room couch watching this black box. It's very, very clearly just a television. Like that's the symbolism David Lynch was trying to get across. But yes, so those two people die a horrible, horrible death. And that's sort of the first indication that this isn't your grandma's Twin Peaks. I would say.
Well, it's the first indication that David Lynch has a lot more freedom than he did in 1992.
Right. It should be noted also that Mark Frost does come back for this, which I think
David
was
Lynch directed every episode, I think.
Yes, he directed every episode, but Mark Frost co-wrote the entire series with him, as opposed to Fire Walk with Me, which Mark Frost was absent from, which led to that being a whole lot darker than this is, which this still gets pretty dark. Like I said, those people die a horrible, horrible death. And then we kind of bounce around from different locations from time to time, but I can't remember if it's episode 2 or episode 3 where we're introduced to who I'm going to call the main character of this series, a man by the name of Douglas Jones. And Sir Douglas, when we're introduced to him, he's got this long brown hair, and he's chubby, and he's hooking up with a prostitute in a house that he has rented, and he passes out on the floor. And at the point of passing out, Cooper, who has now served his time in the Black Lodge, because I guess that's how it works. It's been 25 years, and I guess he gets to go back.
Yeah, the arm is like, you must go, and he must return.
Right. So Dougie Jones was a second
It-
doppelganger created by
Mr. C, who
Mr.
is Bob
C.
that inhabit essentially Bob possessing Cooper's body. It's a doppelganger of Coop that Bob possesses, essentially.
Right. So the Mr. C who's walking around is the Cooper that was in the finale of the
Season
original
two. He's the one that's
season
like,
two.
how's Annie?
Exactly. Who
Uh,
was not real Coop, who it was a doppelganger of Coop created for Bob to possess.
Yes,
So
and he has the most leathery skin
he's
you've
got
ever
the
seen.
most leathery skin, man. They
And-
do a really good job of making him look like Bob, but
Yes.
he can only be in the doppelganger's body for 25 years. That time is up. So a few years earlier, he creates another doppelganger of that body, gives him his own personality, and sets him out into the world named Douglas Jones.
Yes.
When
he's
Cooper-
he's not like Bob levels of chaos, but he's still not a good guy. He cheats on his wife, he gambles, he gets into debt, blah 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 blah.
Right. Cooper is about to re-inhabit his original
C.
body, Mr. C's body. There's a horrible car accident. For whatever reason, I wasn't really sure why. Instead of going into Mr. C's body, he instead goes into Dougie Jones's body.
Well, Mr. C vomits up a lot of black goo.
Yes, that is true.
I think I took it as Mr. C was legally dead for like a couple of minutes, and as such, Cooper couldn't possess a dead body.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so he vomits up the black goo. He's still around. He's on his mission. It appears his mission is to defeat Judy because she's the only person in the world who's more evil than he is. That's kind
Yes.
of the way I took his mission this
Oh,
series.
it's like the whole. So we see in a very special episode that Judy essentially births Bob.
Correct.
That she brings him into this world. I don't know. I took it more as like a parental thing because that's all like this show is. It's all about parents.
Is it?
Yeah, at least Laura's parts. Well, Laura and Donna's parts always seem to be about their parents.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I could buy it.
I took it as some kind of connection to that I also didn't quite understand. I'm just like with David Lynch, it's like looking through the fog and trying to see a town. And every now and again you'd see one light pop on and then that light would go off for another 5 years. And you have to keep trying to find it.
It's like trying to find a village in Minecraft.
It really is. You never know what you're looking for, really.
So yeah, so that happens, and when Cooper inhabits Dougie Jones's body, he essentially, I don't even know that he's inhabiting his body as much as that is Cooper. He just doesn't remember anything. He's almost taken back to like a childlike state. Where he doesn't know what is going on. So Stacy, the prostitute who he's with, who gives 2 rides, by the way,
Right. This gives 2 rides.
takes him back to the casino where they met, presumably, or where she works, I guess. Takes him back there, and Mr. Jackpots, as he comes to be known, wins just by sheer luck and Black Lodge magic, keeps winning jackpots over and over and over and over and over again. And he takes all the money back to his wife, or I guess she comes and picks him up when he gets caught by security because they think he's cheating, but they can't find any proof of it. His wife comes and picks him up and gets onto him for gambling, and then Dougie Jones, who doesn't know what he's doing, just...
Yeah, okay. So Cooper as Dougie Jones basically has the mind of a 1-year-old, essentially. And there's quite a neat scene when Cooper possesses Dougie Jones. It's not an exact recreation. Like his fingers shrink a little bit. He loses a bit of weight. He morphs into how Coop was 25 years ago, and it's just I don't know. It's a nice little touch to see that. Like you don't really. It's a nice visual confirmation of what's going on, which you very rarely get in Twin Peaks.
Right. And so the money he won at the casino turns out to...
Mr. Jackpots.
Right. The money Mr. Jackpots wins pays for the debt that him and his family are in. And that sort of sets us off on the Dougie Jones storyline of this season, which is my personal favorite storyline of the whole season. And we will talk about that a bit more, but we kind of need to shift back a little bit to Twin Peaks for a moment.
Just like the show.
Right. Shift back. Well, that's what I meant. We need to shift back to the town of Twin Peaks for a moment, where Hawk, the log lady calls Hawk, who the log lady is a psychic woman who talks to her log, who may or may not be possessed by her dead husband. We're not really sure.
You never know.
She gives a phone call to Deputy Hawk and starts talking about Cooper. And at the same time, Gordon and his team, the Blue Rose team, sort of get on this. They're looking for Judy ultimately, but they sort of get derailed a bit because of some evidence of Cooper coming back, and they want to find their long lost teammate. And so that sort of sets up the basic framework of the season, which does get completely derailed the further along we go, but that sets up the basic framework for how this season goes. The Blue Rose team goes and they pick up Diane, who we've only heard in name only, played excellently by Holdo, Agent Holdo. It's the same character, I'm convinced. That's the
it's
only
got
thing.
the dyed hair.
Right.
Well, makeshift. Is it Diane? That's the question.
I mean, we haven't gotten there yet. We're only talking about the first half of the season, Josh.
We've talked about the first half of the season, and it's nearly 30 minutes.
Right. Well, that's good. Now we can shift focus to episode 8, because, like I said, it's basically just that for a lot of the season. It's Dougie Jones doing the Jar Jar Binks thing, or we determined we should probably go with Mr. Magoo. Because that probably created this trope. It's a trope that I hate.
It's the earliest one I can think of, and you describe best.
It's a trope that I hate. And like I said, think Jar Jar Binks in Phantom Menace, where he keeps doing these... He keeps, like, messing things up, but when he messes things up, they turn out to be the right thing to do. So, for instance, Dougie Jones goes gambling, which is the wrong thing to do because his family's horribly in debt from his gambling, but then he wins enough money to pay off his debt. Little things like that, all over the place.
Also, when he goes gambling, he has a little ghost telling him which machines are going to hit the jackpot next.
Yes.
And there's that great moment where, like, there's this old homeless woman who's also there, and he sees her, and she's, like, really curious, so he just points at, like, another one, and she goes and gets the jackpot.
She's the one who gives him the name Mr. Jackpots.
Mr. Jackpots. Yeah, and he goes around, and he just repeats stuff that he hears. So, like, he hears the machine say, hello. He hears a guy yell, hello, as he does a Mr. Jackpots. And so for the rest of the series, he just keeps yelling hello at people.
Right.
And it's so great.
Right, like I said, picture a 1-year-old, and you've got Dougie Jones, and it's a trope that I don't like, ever really. I think it's really hard to do well, but this series does it so perfectly, and Dougie Jones is such a great, lovable goofball that it's my best example of it in existence is Dougie Jones, is the Mr. Magoo of it all. And he does a really great job.
It's perfect.
Yeah, and he kind of, the real Dougie Jones, his relationship with his family isn't great. He doesn't have a great relationship with his wife or his son.
No. Like when his wife picks him up, and he says Stacy gives 2 bites, and she just goes, "I'm sure she does, honey."
Well, that comes with the blackmail photos that came in the mail of him with this prostitute.
Yeah, he's also in debt to like the mob who own the casino, I think.
Yes, I think they kind of. I don't know. I don't know.
He's in debt to someone who blackmails him and tries to car bomb him. Right,
exactly. I think the mob showing up at his house came later. Or showing up at Stacy's house came later.
Yes.
But there's a lot of that, and that's basically the season. Hawk and the police officers at Twin Peaks are going on this, basically pulling the string until they can find They're going on this wild goose chase for Cooper, just based off of what the log lady told them, as well as some other stuff kind of happens in Twin Peaks that's weird, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it. Most of the Twin Peaks stuff outside of the police is basically just wrapping up loose ends from the series. One of my favorite moments, Nadine comes up to Ed and apologizes for everything that she put him through, and tells him, it's okay. Go to Norma and tell her you love her. I know you do. I've known my whole life, and I've stayed with you anyway. And so he goes, and Big Ed gets the girl, and there are all these little details like that are great. We're introduced to Bobby and Shelley's daughter. Turns out Bobby and Shelley aren't together, which is a very David Lynch way to wrap that up.
Well, they're not together, but they have a daughter who's dating the guy from Get Out or Banshee from First Class, and he goes for a job interview with Mike, Nadine's ex-boyfriend, which is like, I think it's his only appearance in the show.
Yeah, it's it. It was just there for him to show up.
Yeah, and he just goes, "This is literally the worst resume that I have ever seen. It would have been better if you came in here with nothing instead."
And that guy, that actor, I don't know his name. He is the greasiest man on the planet.
Callum something or other, I think.
He is so greasy, and he plays a coked out lunatic in the show. Yeah. There's the trailer park analogy I talked about last week on the film show, where we don't really see the trailer park in Twin Peaks. Everything in Twin Peaks looks sort of nice and clean, but then when we get to the anti-Twin Peaks in Fire Walk with Me, we do see a seedy trailer park in another town, and then.
Right. The guy who owns that trailer park also turns up in Twin Peaks, which is nice.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, I say it's nice. A little kid does get hit with a car.
Well, yes.
And he witnesses his soul go to heaven. But it's nice to see. I'm not going to remember his name, and I love him. I mean, he's in Alien. He's a huge B movie actor. Everyone loves him. He died a few years ago too. It's gonna go. Harry Dean Stanton.
That's his name. Yeah.
Great guy.
So that happens, and now we're gonna shift focus a little bit. Also, Bobby's father, Briggs.
Briggs is dead.
He's dead, and because he got sucked into the Black Lodge at the end of season 2. No, it happened between seasons because he was back.
He comes back and he gives Bobby that whole spiel about how he had a dream and just goes on for 20 minutes, and then Bobby breaks down and cries, and that's the last time we ever see him.
Right, and then we sort of shift focus with him. His body shows up, but he hasn't aged any. His head has just been decapitated, and they find his body in the house of the woman who... with the woman's head, who Shaggy from Scooby-Doo was having an affair on his wife with.
Yes, which is probably the saddest storyline.
Yes, Matthew Lillard's storyline gets me every time. But so apparently, we'll just kind of break this down, and then we'll go into episode 8. So Matthew Lillard's character, whose name I can't remember, he's the principal of the elementary school, and he gets really into this Black Lodge mythology that he starts reading about. He summons Agent Briggs somehow. Him and this woman, who I think was the librarian at the school, who was also interested in it. They both summon him, and then the next day she winds up dead, and he's framed for her murder. And then the Blue Roses team, as they're tracing down loose ends, finds him and talks about his story, and then his head explodes. So that's done. That's out of the way.
Yeah. Don't need to talk about it again. The show really doesn't.
Right. That's just there to reintroduce us to Briggs and show that he's now just
the Black Lodge and everything. Just kind of show that. I always took it as the influence of Twin Peaks is spreading because Bob's been out and about.
Yeah, I could see that. Plus, then we get to see his head floating in the White Lodge with a CGI mouth because he passed away several years back.
Right.
So let's get on to episode 8, and let's just talk about it. Episode 8 is the most Lynchian episode of the whole series. And I know you slept through it the first time. Did you also sleep through it the second time?
No, I don't think I did. I can't remember the ending, but I didn't sleep through it, I don't think. It's the most abstract that I think the show's ever gotten. Well, it's definitely the most abstract the show's ever gotten. It's just it's a full hour that doesn't have any real life like Twin Peaksian or
It opens with Mr. C getting shot.
right. That's about it really.
Right. It opens
Other
with
than that, it's just abstract on abstract on abstract.
it goes to a flashback of the first nuclear test in America, the first nuclear bomb test, I guess, in the world. I say in America, but it's the first nuclear bomb test. And then we sort of zoom into the nuke, and the whole episode's in black and white, except for these beautiful colors inside of this nuke. It's an absolutely gorgeous episode. And we sort of, we go inside of the explosion and we explore that a little bit. And then we cut to outer space.
Where the giant and the arm are watching this nuclear explosion.
Yes. And Judy's there.
And Judy's there, yes.
And she's vomiting up children.
She vomits up Bob and Mike and Laura, I think.
No, Laura comes later.
Right, Laura comes later then. Yeah, she vomits up Bob and Mike, and it's like she vomits up these orbs, and in them are Bob and Mike. Like you can see their faces.
Yes, she vomits up her eggs, which crash in Nevada.
Which crash in Nevada. And then
some frogs with wings, like cockroach frogs, come out of the eggs.
Yes, they do, and then it switches to. Is that when we get to the Woodsman?
Yes, now it's the greatest zombie movie ever made, the most horrifying zombie movie you've ever seen, because the Woodsmen start coming out, and the Woodsmen are basically just, I guess, Judy's servants or Bob's servants, someone's servants, but they're essentially zombies, and they start attacking people. And then we cut to this little preteen couple who are walking home from a dance, and they're just walking home and talking. And according to the novelization of this, that woman was Laura Palmer's mother. It's left somewhat ambiguous in the actual episode, but according to the novelization of the series, that is Laura Palmer's mother. And that's the official novelization. So it could be said that that's Laura Palmer's mother. She goes into her house. He goes home. They kiss a little bit, a little peck. One of the woodsmen, they just go around killing people, basically. He breaks into a radio station.
That's the Abraham Lincoln one, right?
Yes, that he's played by the actor who
only ever plays Abraham Lincoln.
Correct. Yeah, he's basically only ever played Abraham Lincoln in things. He's been in some other stuff in little bit parts. So he breaks into this radio station and he kills the DJ, which was horrifying for me because that's what I do for a living. And he just squeezes his head. Right. He just squeezes his head until it explodes. And then he starts talking to the mic and he gives this speech that basically hypnotizes people into falling asleep.
Apparently.
Josh, we forgot about the convenience store.
Do we have to talk about the convenience store?
Yeah, we got to talk about the convenience store.
It's the most boring thing I've seen. I think that was the part that genuinely put me to sleep.
Yeah. The explosion is somewhat boring because they hold on it for a long time, but at least it's pretty. The convenience store.
Visually, it held me because it was visually really interesting, and it's a great nuclear explosion. And like the music too is fantastic.
It's I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's it was written
as a tribute to like Hiroshima victims, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called, but yeah. So that it plays through and it's gorgeous. And then we cut to the convenience store, which is created amidst this explosion, and the woodsmen start walking around in that, and that's the creation of the woodsmen. It's their place of.
That goes on for. It feels like 20 minutes, and it's just nothing.
I genuinely think it was like 10 minutes.
It's very likely, but it's just like it's sped up, and they kind of walk around, and then they will go inside, and then they come back, and they walk around, and they will go inside, and it's just that on repeat over and over and over again.
And it's
I like David Fincher's stuff, but that was kind of a bit too much for me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
and it starts flashing. It's the convenience store that Philip Jeffries mentions in Fire Walk with Me, as well as there's a woodsman there. We actually get to see the inside of it.
Yeah, you see proto-woodsman, I suppose you'd call it.
Right. They're just hanging out in the convenience store in the weirdest date you've ever been on. There's a Formica table. Green is its color. And then...
Turn in the series, which is nice.
Right, yeah. And then...
He haven't aged one bit.
Right. So then the woodsman give the speech that makes people fall asleep, and then...
It's got a light.
Right. Well, it's what is it? The water in the well, the white horse drink up and be filled, or something along those lines.
It sounds like a hocus pocus line.
Yes, genuinely. So the little girl who was listening falls asleep, and then
the bugs go into her room, and they crawl inside her mouth, and then it ends.
One of them crawls inside her mouth, and then it ends.
Right, and then it switches to Nine Inch Nails playing at the Roadhouse.
Yes.
And the episode ends, and David Lynch goes, "There you go.
That's a wrap, everybody."
Yeah, it is really abstract, and I know you weren't as much of a fan of it. I like it for the most part. Like I said, the convenience store bit's a little bit too much for me to just touch too far, but it's mostly pretty fun, and it's got some of the most interesting visuals I've really seen in a long time.
I would agree there. It was gorgeous. I will give it that, but it just kind of didn't capture me. Like I said, it's so gorgeous. They were playing it in movie theaters at the time when this came out, which is really neat. But like I said, a bit too much for me.
Well, in terms of relating to the show, because everything we said just then doesn't seem to make sense, but it's essentially just kind of an origin story, and it's like, hey, so this is how Twin Peaks, this is how the Black Lodge was made, this is how Twin Peaks and the evil within Twin Peaks kind of came to be. And it's a nice little metaphor, I guess, for like, the evil in Twin Peaks came from the evil of man.
Yes, you could have done that in 5 minutes, and they took an hour. That's my thing with it. But it is visually great, and it's the episode that slowed me down a little bit. But then I just went to the next episode, and the next episode's normal. So,
the next episode is just like that's kind of more Mr. C stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, again, it's more, that's when you find out about Major Briggs, right? Where they're like, oh yeah, this is some dude who disappeared 20 years ago.
I think so. And the second half of the season sort of shifts a bit from the first half.
Right. Well, the first half is very much kind of catch up and set up.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely just payoff.
Right. And that's where we sort of kind of keep unraveling the stuff with the FBI. Dougie Jones is becoming more and more successful in his thing, and he's figuring out more and more stuff. He rediscovers coffee and the thumbs up, and a lot of little details like that happen. But we also find out a whole lot more about Mr. C. We figure out how he created that room where the guy was watching the big black box where Judy killed him. We learn a little more about Judy and where she came from.
Yeah. We forgot to mention about Jerry Horn and what he's up to nowadays.
Oh yeah, so that's another little subplot that just kind of plays throughout the series. Jerry Horn
now lives.
He lives in the woods because he got so high he got lost there, and he's just a hippie with a beard, and it's incredible.
It's great.
And Ben Horn seems to have cleaned up a lot. He doesn't...
Yeah, he's living his life. He's just kind of... He's not even a shady businessman now. He's just kind of a businessman who operates his hotel.
Which makes sense given his arc in season 2 of the show. Season 2 of the show, he sort of redeemed himself, I guess, and now here he is just living his life. We're also in the second half of the season introduced to Audrey Horn.
Right, yeah.
Which gives a little leeway to the theory that I have settled on as my theory for what this show means. Which it's a shame you have to have I guess it's not a shame, it's pretty great, but you have to have a theory to make sense of the series.
It's great that the show never ever confirms anything outright.
Right. So we're introduced to Audrey Horn, who is one of the better characters from the series. And she basically never leaves her house until she finally does in the last episode she's in. And her husband is he's either a lawyer or a writer.
I never knew.
I think he's a writer. I'm pretty sure he's an author. And he keeps saying things along the lines of "I'll write you out of this" or whatever. And she just really wants her coat. She really wants him to put on her coat. And
Wait, so she wakes up pregnant from after the bank explosion.
does she? Is she pregnant?
Yeah, I thought she woke up finding out she was pregnant.
I don't remember that at all. Maybe you're right. I don't know.
Well, I was pretty sure that was a thing. Like she woke up, and then everyone tried to help her out, being like, "Hey, you shouldn't be a single mother," and she turned them all away. And then I think she, like, when Richard, her horrible son, was like 10, that's when she got married.
I don't remember the stuff about her son at all, but I could have fallen asleep. Genuinely, I could have, and I'm probably just missing that. I just remember the conversation between her and her tiny, tiny short husband.
Uh,
Where, and this is interesting because I do want to note this because the conversation they're having is that they're looking for Billy.
yes,
And-
who Audrey's been cheating on.
She's been cheating on her husband with this guy named Billy. And she wants to go to the roadhouse to look for him. She's trying to convince her husband to leave, who keeps saying, "We can't leave." And then finally, when it's time to leave, now she's hesitant, but she goes anyway. They go to the roadhouse, and then Audrey's dance starts playing at the roadhouse. And she gets up and starts dancing, and all eyes are on her. And then things kind of go back to seedy Twin Peaks again, and people get in a bar fight. And then it cuts to her in an all-white room staring at herself in a mirror. Which is super weird and super out there, but it does. I guess we'll talk about theories at this point, and we'll tie it into the finale when we get there. We got about 10 minutes left on this thing, which is not enough time to talk about this. But
No.
so my favorite theory I've heard about this, about the return, is that the specific Audrey Horne stuff doesn't actually take place in the Twin Peaks world. Instead, it takes place in the real world, and that is the actress coming to realization that she is not she's not a star anymore. She's not a young star with all eyes on her, with her whole career ahead of her. She's now a middle-aged woman who barely has a career. That's why her husband keeps saying, "I'll write you out of this story." So her at the end in the white room is not Audrey Horne. That's the actress who plays her coming to that realization.
I like that. It's sad, but it's also kind of neat.
Yeah, it's really neat. And the thing that sells me on it the most is Billy, specifically, because Billy Zane is the actor who played her love interest in the original show. But they didn't use his name from the show. They used the actual actor's name as opposed to using his name from the series. And that's what sold me on that theory specifically for the Audrey Horne stuff, which is super fascinating. I don't know that it's true or not. I know David Lynch did threaten to write her out of the series.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, he did. They had a lot of controversy. They didn't really get along. He threatened to write her out of the series, and then he didn't put her in Fire Walk with Me, even though she would have been there.
She was friends with, not friends. She knew of and was acquaintances with Laura Palmer.
Right, exactly. She went to the high school. They could have just cut to a scene of her, but they didn't.
She has as much reason to be in there as James does.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, James and Laura were dating, so
maybe it's just my hate for James for being too cool. But we might as well. We've got 10 minutes to wrap up about half a season. So to the speed round, so to speak. So Dougie goes into a coma
because
he shocks himself with a fork in the socket.
He sticks a fork in a light socket. And we didn't even get to all the great Dougie Jones stuff. You just kind of have to watch it for that.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's phenomenal.
So Dougie Jones goes into a coma, and we're in like the last 2 or 3 episodes here. Dougie Jones,
I think episode it's 2 episodes for the finale.
Right. When he wakes up from his coma, he is no longer Dougie Jones. He is the FBI.
In the best line I've ever heard.
It's so incredible. He wakes up and it's like Coop didn't skip a beat. I mean, it's classic Twin Peaks Special Agent Dale Cooper. He stands up, he takes all the things off of him. He's talking to the nurse and he says, "You'll find that all of my vitals are spot on perfect if you just look." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you are. I guess you can leave." And so he leaves and he sets up all his plan that he's had 25 years now to lay out. And he starts setting up his plan, and the FBI's on his way. And Dougie Jones' boss turns to him and says, "Dougie, what do we do about the FBI?" And he just turns to him and he says, "I am the FBI." And then he leaves and he pulls all these favors that Dougie Jones has collected throughout the series, which is also great that Dougie Jones was just collecting.
Yeah, it all comes together essentially.
It Mr. Magoo's itself together. And that's when we get to, that's an episode, right? And then we get to, not technically the finale, but I'm going to call it the first finale.
It's a two-parter.
Right. And it's really interesting the way that they do it because Bob appears as an orb and this British guy that James meets. James is there for the finale, which is awesome because he's so cool. We meet this British guy who was told a few months earlier that his destiny was in Twin Peaks. And so Cooper shows up in Twin Peaks and everything kind of falls into place. And then there's this whole battle inside of the sheriff's department. And this British guy just punches Bob to death. And that's where the episode ends.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
That's what I would call the normal finale of the show. You can stop right there and you have a nice conclusion to Twin Peaks.
Yeah, you've got Bob is defeated, Coop's back, and everyone, Mr. C is dead. Everyone lives happily ever after, essentially.
Lucy, by the way, kills Mr. C, which is my favorite part.
We didn't even talk about Michael Cera.
Oh, Michael Cera plays Lucy and Andy's son. That's all you needed to know. That's all you needed to know. Lucy is horribly scared of cell phones too, by the way.
Terribly. She's just as great now. So is Andy. But yeah, so that all happens, and then that's like the Mark Frost finale, and then the episode after is the David Lynch finale, where
half the episode is Cooper and Diane driving.
Yeah, half the episode is Cooper and Diane driving, and then they spend the night together in a motel. He wakes up with a note from Linda, I think it says.
Well, we should note that it's the most horribly uncomfortable sex scene since Fire Walk with Me.
I was just going to skip over it because I don't... Is there... There's no... No, I'm not going to... No.
There's no dialogue. There's barely any sound. You can tell neither of them want to be doing what they're doing.
I mean, they dated for a while.
Right.
And it's so awkward.
But I think the reason it's awkward on purpose. I don't think it's awkward like in real life.
Yeah, I'm assuming they're they seem very professional people, and they both seem to love David Lynch.
Right. Well, it seems to be their way of summoning Judy.
Right, but Judy they say like this negative force, just this whose actual name is like Jowdy or something like that.
Right. Okay. We've got 2 minutes to wrap up this finale. Josh, go.
Okay. So that happens. Coop wakes up. He goes to a diner. He essentially kills 3 cowboys. He then notices that one of the waitresses at Judy's diner is an exact replica of Laura Palmer. So he takes her to Twin Peaks, to her old house. And it is that point where he knocks on the door and he finds that it's owned by someone who isn't Mrs. Palmer, who is actually still alive.
Okay. Wait. It should be noted, and we'll talk about this in a moment. The woman the quote-unquote actress who owns that house is the woman who owns that house in real life. She comes to the door. She's not an actress. That's the actual person who physically owns the Laura Palmer house in real life. Go.
At that point, Cooper asks what year it is, and then they hear Laura's mom calling her name, and then the house goes out, and then it closes, and that's it. And then Laura's talking to Cooper in the black room again. Well, that's it.
We didn't go to the black and white stuff from where Cooper goes back to the Fire Walk with Me.
Saves Laura Palmer's life, essentially.
Saves Laura Palmer's life, but then she disappears, and then that's when Cooper wakes up. Okay.
Right.
That's the finale of the show.
That's the finale of the show. There's a lot of theories going around, like the one you said about it being in real life. There's another one that's it. There's a theory that's like it's all a dream, which I guess is a cop out, but I could also see it. I saw one which is something like when everything from when Cooper wakes up after having sex with Diane, that's all a dream. That's incited by Judy to give him some kind of sense of closure, and so she can enact her plan,
Mm,
or so that she can keep living and doesn't have to die.
that's interesting. I
Uh,
I kind of like that.
that's why you have like Judy's diner.
Right. So the one that I buy the most is that whole final sequence where Coop wakes up and he goes and he goes to Judy's diner. All of that stuff takes place in the real world, not in the Twin Peaks world, which I think is the only real proof you have of that is that the woman who owns that house is the real woman who owns the house,
Not like an actress or anything.
not like an actress or anything. It's just the actual person, but that could have been just David Lynch thanking her for letting them use her house.
But with the name of the person is Carrie Page, who is the woman that Laura delivers food to in season 1, I think.
Right, which that adds the idea that maybe they went back in time too far, but
Why he's asking what year it is.
right?
It's David Lynch, and here's the thing: you will never be able to get an answer on this. Like this
Right.
is
Well, the stuff, like I said, there are a lot of details that I think play into the idea that it's the real world, such as when you drive by the Double R Diner, it doesn't have the Twin Peaks sign on it. It's got the actual sign from the real company on it. None of the stuff looks very Twin Peaks. It looks more like a real town as opposed to the way Twin Peaks is presented in the series. Like I said, that's just the theory that I buy into, but it's all really complicated and I don't really understand any of it. Which is
I
kind of
don't
the fun.
But that's half the fun of Twin Peaks is trying to guess what it means and then giving it your own meaning.
Right, exactly. I mean, you can take and make. I mean, ultimately, it's good versus evil, especially the original series. But I don't know. It's great. I like I said, Twin Peaks: The Return is probably my favorite Twin Peaks. We didn't even talk about the arm wrestling scene. Man, you just need to watch it. If you haven't seen it and you watch through this, yeah, sure, it's been.
We'll probably end up mentioning it again on future podcasts, but it's a spectacle to be seen, and
Absolutely.
there will never ever be anything quite like Twin Peaks.
No, I mean until David Lynch's Netflix series comes out.
Right, and then you maybe have something. You may have another part of Twin Peaks.
I would be surprised. But all right, Josh, we did it. We described all of Twin Peaks: The Return in an hour.
Yeah, we skipped over like half the things.
Yeah, we didn't even scratch the surface.
But either way, thank you very much for joining us for the last hour, and we hope you have a nice day. And if you haven't, I would really, 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 really recommend Twin Peaks. It's a fantastic show, and you will get so much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, no matter where you're listening, thanks for listening. If you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, any of the podcast platforms, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. And I guess we will see you next week.